everyone to the Huntington Woods Art and Garden Fair today. We are fortunate to have Laura Mikulski speaking this afternoon for us. Laura is dedicated to creating positive change within her community. As a renowned community leader, she has consistently demonstrated unwavering commitment to improving the lives of those around her. Laura's tireless efforts have not only made her a respected figure, but have also earned her recognition as a true champion for ethical and humane pest control practices. With an unyielding passion for the environment, Laura has emerged as a leading voice in the quest for sustainability and conservation. Her deep-rooted love for nature has fueled her determination to promote environmentally and friendly solutions, specifically in the field of pest control. Recognizing the importance of balancing pest management with respect for all living creatures, Laura has been a fervent advocate for ethical and humane approaches, striving to minimize harm to both animals and the ecosystem. Laura is a member of the Ferdale City Council and was recently featured in Time magazine article. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you. We've got the lights. Beautiful. Okay, thank you all for coming out. I'm very happy to talk about a very sensitive subject, a little bit of a taboo subject, and I hope by the end of this presentation it's a little bit less taboo. Come on, there we go. So, as I was introduced, my name is Laura Mikulski. I am a member of the Ferdale Rat Patrol. I'm a Ferdale resident. I'm not a pest control rep, nor am I a licensed pest control person. And I have been killing rats in Ferdale since 2012. Now, Ferdale Rat Patrol was founded in 2016, and we very quickly became a sort of a force of good within our community. It was a group of us, myself included. I was the leading rat killer. The rest were very enthusiastic about learning and spreading the knowledge and helping their neighbors. And I very quickly became known as the Rat Lady, and that is why I was featured in Time magazine very recently, because of the efforts that Ferdale has put out to really get ahead of the rat problem, talk about it, educate their residents, and do something proactive. So Ferdale Rat Patrol is closing in on 7,000 members. We're at 6,000 members right now. Again, we started in 2016. Something that I love to point out that I think people don't really appreciate until they see it is that 63% of our membership are women, because women tend to really see a problem, get involved, and want to just solve it. They throw themselves all the way into Ferdale Rat Patrol and rat patrol efforts. So now, why did I get involved? Number one, we can see over on the left-hand side my infamous picture of 7 dead rats on a tree stump that I used to trot out whenever it was wildly inappropriate, like at very professional events or dinner parties. I am an elegant lady, and I loved bringing that out so that we could talk about something that feels really terrible to talk about, but is part of our everyday life when we acknowledge it. I also got involved because of this little owl right here. And shortly after Rat Patrol was founded, this owl ended up in a woman's bedroom in Ferdale, the most bizarre thing in the world. And she put out a note on Facebook saying, "I've got this little owl, I don't know what's wrong with it. I came and got it, brought it to a raptor rescue, and that little owl ended up dying because it was suffering from rat poison." And part of my personal story as to why I got involved and why I had a stump with 7 dead rats, because those are my dead rats, everybody. The reason I got involved is because one summer I saw rats in my backyard. I did nothing about it. But that same summer, I saw a whole family of owls slowly but surely die off in my neighborhood. And I quickly understood that my lack of action meant that somebody else had to take action, and they didn't know a better solution. So it became a personal mission of mine to really make sure that people understood all the different things that you can do, so that we don't end up with situations like this hawk in Central Park in New York City that was clearly eating a rat that had a belly full of rat poison. It's a counterproductive sort of solution. So in order to effectively manage rats, we have to understand what they are, what they look for, their behavior, all of the little nuts and bolts of what drives a rat to do rat stuff. So the rats that we are dealing with are Norway rats. They're a brown rat. They are the large-bodied rat that likes to burrow in the ground. They are not native to the US. They're from China originally. They are an invasive species. They are naturalized, so that doesn't mean that they're not invasive. It just means that they've been around us and they've been so habituated that they have adapted to our environment. They like to be around humans. Rats aren't out in the forest on their own. They love us. We've got all the good stuff. Our pets have all the good stuff. They want to be around us. We have great sidewalks and sheds that they can burrow under. We have delicious smelling trash, all the good stuff that rats want. Now, rats are very different than your house mouse. If you want to figure out if something's a rat, you look for a big, dense body with a blunt nose versus a mouse that has a pointier nose and larger ears. Things to know about rats so that we can figure out where they are and how to eliminate them. We are looking for burrow systems. They prefer to burrow, meaning they dig into the dirt to build a home. Their average lifespan is under a year. They can jump 3 feet vertically from a flat surface, 4 feet horizontally. So again, if we are trying to figure out how to eliminate these pests or how to track them, we have to keep things like that in mind. They can fall from 50 feet without getting hurt. They can climb bricks, trees, telephone poles, downspouts. They can swim over a mile and tread water for up to 3 days, which is why I don't like certain solutions out there like bucket traps that the internet have popularized. They can get through openings as small as a quarter, like a real quarter, not the blown up quarter that you see on the screen here. They can chew through lead, cinder block, aluminum sheeting, and they have very poor eyesight but an excellent sense of smell, and that is going to be very important when we talk about eliminating them. Breeding info. Wild rats live alone or in colonies of related females. So typically when you see a cluster of rats in a short period of time, that usually means that there's a burrow system nearby and that you have juvenile rats. So those rats are typically coming out of the burrow system looking for a new home. They have litters of 6 to 10 after a gestation period of 3 weeks. They're weaned at 20 days and can breed at 3 to 4 months of age. So again, that cycle can continue to expand. The rat population can continue to expand very rapidly. Males do disperse after weaning. So again, if you see a single rat in your yard, could be a juvenile male looking for a new home, looking for a colony. And male behavior in populations of rats changes based on the density of rats in an area. So again, if you see a solo rat, that means that somewhere there exists a burrow system, probably not right near you, but it's always good to check for that. So in talking about rat population booms, one of the things that Ferndale Rat Patrol has really sort of inspired within the community is that we know that these are animals that have seasonal swings in population growth. So just as an example of why this is so important, if we started with 2 breeding rats in December that produced 10 babies, in March we could potentially have 12 breeding rats, which produce 60 babies. In June, we've got 72 breeding rats that can produce 360 babies. And in September, we've got 432 breeding rats that can produce 2,160 babies. It's a big deal. That's why we get involved. That's why we're proactive about it. And it is something that when we do it right, we can get ahead of what we call our peak season, which is the September timeframe. So every September in Ferndale, we have a little bit of a celebration called Traptoberfest. And we go out and do what we do best, which is find those rats, eliminate them, ahead of the winter cycle where we see them coming into buildings a little bit more frequently. So things to also consider when we're gearing up to find rats and eliminate them. Rats travel 50 to 300 feet from their nest to look for food, water, or to patrol their territory. And again, male rats typically do patrol the edge of a territory. They're primarily nocturnal, but rats that are low in their social ranks will forage during the day. Basically what that means is most of the time when we're trying to deal with a rat situation like trapping, we do it at night because rats are out at night. Rats are omnivores, so examples of food source, food sources: trash, birdseed, dog waste, drop fruit from trees like mulberry trees, if you happen to have one. They're beautiful trees. They're great for the birds, but they are beloved by rats. They are neophobic, which means that new things scare them. So if you're trying to think like a rat and you want to trap a rat, you think of food sources that they're comfortable with, first and foremost. So that doesn't mean that you go out and buy a special bait. You think about what they might be eating near you. They're positively thigmotactic. So there's your $1 million word for the day. Basically what that means is they move into touch. And so rats, much like cats, use their whiskers, but they also use their body to hug walls, which lends to the perfect trapping opportunity, because that means we can position our traps appropriately and we can catch them very humanely, very effectively. And last but not least, scent is a primary driver in attempting to eat something. So we want bait that smells good to a rat. Sweet smells, smells that they're used to. If you have a rat issue and you're near a pizza place, what are you going to use for bait? Pizza. If you have a rat issue and you're near a donut shop, what are you going to use for bait? Donuts. So why do we prevent and eliminate rats? Most of the people that come out to this know why they want to do it. But for those who don't, wild rats carry more than 40 harmful diseases. They urinate while they walk, and their urine and feces contaminate gardens, homes, cars, and orchards. If you have a dog, dogs are very susceptible to leptospirosis. It's a spirochete bacteria that is very common in rat urine. And it is a bacteria that only thrives in that wet environment, like urine or like a puddle or dew on your grass. So be very mindful. If you do have a rat situation, you can get a vaccine for your dog, but also keep your dog out of water. Because rats' teeth constantly grow, they must chew on things. So again, that's why we don't like them near us. They chew on our homes, they chew on the siding. And in the US, about 14,000 people annually report direct attacks from rats. So they're not scared of us. They like being around us, and they will defend themselves if they are in a situation like the one in Warren, where somebody opened their trash can and there was a rat inside and it bit them and they ended up in the hospital. So this is why we are, again, very proactive about doing things about these pests. So some of the myths that are out there, I've heard every single one of them. There's not one that surprises me. And the people that love to say that they've got rats as big as cats, it does not physically happen. It can't happen unless you're dealing with like a micro cat, which sounds super cute, but that's not the way that rats work. They're never going to get that big. They max out in size just like any animal. One rat means that there's 100 more. Not always. It is very good to be vigilant when you see a rat, because you never know if it's a lone rat trying to establish a territory, or is it an indicator that there's a burrow nearby with a whole family unit in there. Rats that are seen during the day mean big populations. Again, not always. Rats move indoors in the fall. Sometimes they do like their burrow systems, and they sometimes live in our storm sewers as well. There's one rat per person in big cities. Unlikely. Absolutely unlikely. Rats avoid people and touch traps. So people think that if they touch traps with their bare hands that a rat won't come to it. Rats love us. Again, our scent doesn't scare them. They want to be near us. So touch that trap as much as you want. Rats won't take bait from a trap after a kill. Absolutely not. Rats trust the smell of other rats. So if a rat dies on your trap, that's okay. That smell of the other rat on that trap is actually an attractant. It's a safe smell. And the smell of cats keeps them away. Absolutely not. There's habituation. Rats are very familiar with cats because they like us, and we have cats. There's also toxoplasmosis. Toxoplasmosis, if a rat is infected, they will be drawn to cats. So you can't rely on cats as a deterrent. So let's talk a little bit about the signs of rats so that we can figure out how we can effectively eliminate them and trap them. So remember your rat facts. Excellent sense of smell. They also pee when they walk. That means that they're leaving little scent highways all over the place. That's something that we can find, and that's something that we can use. Since it's a pre-approved pathway that rats deem safe, we can lay traps along that. Their poor eyesight means that they will follow those same trusted scent trails and stay near walls because, again, positively thigmotactic. They want to be near a surface. It makes them feel safe. And they need to chew and will gnaw on surface periodically, leaving visible marks. If we can find all these things, we can eliminate rats. So we look for droppings. Droppings are very easy to spot. They're big and thick like this. So a little bit bigger than a piece of rice, a little bit thicker than a piece of rice, and they're blunt on the ends. If they're spiky on the ends, just like rice, that's typically more like a mouse dropping. They leave a stink highway. So again, they urinate when they walk. Under UV light, that looks like that on the far left side, where the urine spreads out into carpet or dirt or concrete. And up in our attics or in insulated areas, oftentimes we'll find just depressions where they walk the same path over and over again because they're following that scent trail. We look for rub marks. These are animals that live in the dirt. They have a natural grease on their body, just like our dogs and cats. And since they walk the same path over and over again, that dirt and that body grease leaves a trail. If we can find that trail, what can we do? We can kill the rats. We can lay down traps. We look for burrows. So again, earlier I said that these are animals that like to live in the dirt. That is their natural inclination. What we look for is one main entrance hole and a couple exits because they're smart. They like to go about 2 feet down into the ground in a tunnel. They'll use one entrance and exit on a regular basis, but they have multiple escape hatches because they're smart animals and they want to make sure that they survive. So this was a picture that I believe I took in Chicago or New York. Can't remember which one. But you can see some of the holes in a little bit of a pattern with one primary entrance and exit. These are some more examples of burrows. Think about the way holes are positioned on a bowling ball. If you can find 3 holes, chances are our rats are living right in the middle. That's where they're sleeping. That's great news for us. That means that we know exactly how we can address this if we have the right supplies. Not all holes are from rats. So every year after I do a presentation like this, I get calls from people saying they found a hole in their yard, and immediately it's in your head that it's a rat. It's not always the case. Sometimes you have chipmunks. Chipmunks leave a nice tidy little hole. They're a nice rodent. I love the chipmunks. If you find a hole in the middle of your yard and it's about the size of a quarter, it's typically a chipmunk. You can put a stick in it and it'll go straight down. And again, that's very indicative of a chipmunk hole. Rats, on the other hand, leave these bigger, nastier holes with clear paths that you can see right there where they've walked over and over and over again, leaving a depression in the dirt or the grass. The holes are sloppier, they're bigger, and then if you put a stick in, it goes in at an angle. So look for the angle of the stick if you put one in, and if it's an angle, it's a rat. If it's straight up and down, it's chipmunk. So this is a little bit more of that. This was a chipmunk hole in my front yard. In the springtime, I tend to get phone calls from people thinking that they have rats that they found in their grass. That's usually rabbits. So our eastern cottontail rabbits leave their babies in a shallow depression in the grass. That looks very similar to rats. So small little gray body. If you find rats, you're only going to find them down under the ground somewhere. Every once in a blue moon, you might find them in a garage or a shed under a tarp or some sort of debris, whereas you typically won't find eastern cottontails in that same situation. We look for chew marks, and I love having wires here because for some ungodly reason, rats love chewing on wires, whether it's in your car, whether it's in your house. They find a wire and they're always gonna nibble, nibble, nibble on that plastic part. And in your cars, especially if you have soy-coated wires, they love them. It's something about the smell and the taste that drives them to chew those wires. So we look for that. We also look for pipes in our house where you might see a little bit of chew marks to widen a hole so that they can shimmy up the pipe and come into the rest of your house. And we look on the edges of plastic garbage bins because, again, they're trying to get to the fragrant stuff that's inside because that's food. They love it. In the winter, we have another celebration in Ferndale. The first snow that has any sort of decent level of snow out there, we look for our rat tracks because that means that we can get out there with our traps and we can get them. So these are two seasonal pictures. One was I think it was a Tim Hortons that had a nice rat population that kept walking this path and walking that path. And once you see these things, you can't unsee them. So I'm a joy to walk with in a downtown area because I see them everywhere. You just have to know what to look for because, again, they're basic animals and they have very basic programming. They're gonna walk that path over and over again and they're going to leave a mark behind. And in the winter, it's very easy to spot because we're looking for that tail drag and a hop pattern. Rats travel typically about 150 feet in a radius from their burrow every single night. So when people have a rat issue, one of my first questions is look in your yard, but then talk to your neighbors. So this is just an example of my own house, and it shows that if I see a rat in my house, which God help the rat that ends up in my house or my yard, but if I do, I have to go out in a radius for the immediate proximal area to figure out if there's a burrow there. And I will go all the way out to about 300 feet to try to find it if I can't find it in that first 150 feet. So rats that are desperate, rats that are trying to find a new territory, those are the rats that travel about 300 feet. Most of them stick to 150 feet. So let's talk about preventing them. Don't feed them. It's step one. It's the easiest step. It just means that sometimes we have to change our behavior or we have to be a little bit more vigilant about the things that we like to do. So if you feed the birds, I want you to know that I also feed the birds. People say that you can't do it if you don't want to have rats. You can, you just have to be vigilant. Seed catchers are going to be your best friend. Put a seed catcher underneath your bird feeder and make sure that you empty it on a regular basis. Always use 1/2-inch hardware cloth over plants in your garden that are highly fragrant or very juicy. Tomatoes. Tomatoes are great for rats. They love them. I love them. But I always try to make sure that I protect them. Don't leave your pet food outside overnight. If you have fruit trees, like I mentioned, mulberries or raspberries, as in the picture down at the bottom, just know that if you have any of those things, apple trees, crab apples, sweep up the berries on a regular basis. Try to make sure that you're eliminating that food waste that could be accumulating on the ground. So these are a couple more examples of just how you can put wire over tender plants that rats might enjoy. Don't provide safe space. So what do we know about rat behavior? They like to be up against things. They like to be underneath things. They have poor eyesight. They want to feel safe. So with your bushes, if you have these nice bushes like that, I know that's not exactly the most elegant structure for a bush, but trimming them up off the ground is a really wise choice because that lifts up the ceiling that makes them feel safe, opens it up to a little bit of light, makes them feel less inclined to walk around that wall where they would feel safe. Removing vegetation and ivy, things like that is always a good choice. I, again, do probably everything wrong because I have ivy, I have bushes that are low to the ground, but I am a rat killing machine. So it's one or the other. You can do one of these or just be vigilant about killing the rats. Seal entry holes. So I love some of these pictures because that is an example of one of our lasagna methods. So the far picture is steel wool, and then what we do with Rat Patrol is we take the steel wool, push it in around a pipe, use spray foam, and then push more steel wool in there as well. So we're sandwiching it and pushing it in and packing it in to make it very difficult for any animals to get in there. We also tend to use metal to form a little cone, a reverse cone, on pipes that we believe rats are climbing up. And then you can get things like this. If you have a brick home, you have to have a weep hole with brick homes. But there's weep hole covers, which is just a little piece of metal most of the time that you can sandwich into these holes, and that prevents mice in particular, or sometimes rats when they're smaller and they can chew away at your brick and get in your home. So we also prevent intrusion using hardware cloth. We can stuff hardware cloth. Again, the 1/2-inch hardware cloth is the gold standard. It's the best sort of cloth to prevent them from getting into spaces. We can use things like these threshold sweeps. This one in particular is called a rat excluder, and it is plastic, but it also has metal impregnated in that plastic to prevent rats from chewing through it to get underneath the door. And then always use some metal around pipes, especially if you have a crawl space. If you have a crawl space, rats love them. It's a great area for them to be in, and they love shimmying up your pipes underneath your sink or into cabinets or things like that. So this is just another example of, again, crawl spaces and pipes. You can use metal mesh, and there are a variety of sizes that you can get for metal mesh. My gold standard is the 1/2-inch hardware cloth, but you can go down as far as 1/55, and you'll prevent bugs at that level. Most places have 1/2-inch hardware cloth nowadays. You can get it from Menards, Ace Hardware, any of them. So common rat havens, look to your decks. I hate a deck. I hate a deck. I've crawled under too many decks trying to do rat control issues. And if you have a deck that's that low to the ground, nobody can crawl under it. And this is not a burrow opening. That's a slide hole. That means that they're just getting under there, and their burrow system is probably further in. So dry icing this or doing any of our burrow control techniques won't work. With slabs like that, that's a little bit easier for us to address because that looks like it's actually part of a burrow system. So ways that we can prevent that, we take 1/2-inch hardware cloth, 2 feet down, 2 feet out in an L shape. It is difficult and it requires trenching and manual labor, but once you do this, you're preventing rats, skunks, any animal from getting under your deck forever. So a special note on rat repellents. Everybody wants to believe that there's something that you can use to prevent rats from coming into your yard. There's tons of home remedies out there. There's tons of DIY advice on the internet. I am here to tell you that rats will only be repelled if they don't already consider it a safe space. So again, they have a habit that they're following, where they followed a scent trail, they've established a pattern, they keep their body moving into an area over and over and over again. No amount of mothballs, peppermint oil, Dawn dish soap, all the different fragrant things that people want to use, no amount of that is going to change the fact that their body has established a pattern, and they are going to follow that pattern over and over again. Other things like these sonic devices, I love this picture because everybody wants to try it, but in certain cases, you'll end up with a rat or a mouse right on top of it. When you think about it, it doesn't make sense as a solution because these are animals that communicate in almost a subsonic range anyway. So don't waste your money. If you do want to try something, know that you can use predator urine. You can use a product called Fresh Cab. It's a balsam oil-based product. Those all work, but they only work if the rats haven't established themselves. One thing that does work and is a critical last step in any rat elimination and prevention campaign is eliminating the scent trail. So again, once they've established their body pattern where they're walking over and over again, they're peeing as they go, they're rubbing their body against things, there's a scent there. We have to get rid of it. If we don't get rid of it, more rats will always find that trail and they will reestablish themselves. So once you have eliminated the rats, you have to get rid of it by using 1 part bleach to 10 parts water to scrub down the area or pour it on soil. Now that 1 part bleach to 10 parts water is very safe for plants, anything tender, grass, things like that. You can scale that up to a 50-50 mix in heavily soiled areas like concrete or just plain dirt. You can definitely do that, but if you're concerned about your vegetation or anything, do the 1 part bleach to 10 parts water and you'll be just fine. So let's talk about actually eliminating them. First step talk about it. And you don't have to get up here and lecture people like I do, like a giant weirdo, but talk to your neighbors, because again, if we think back to that map that I showed and the 150 feet and the 300 feet, it's never just a you problem. It is always a regional problem. There's always others somewhere. So that's why it's important to talk to your neighbors, get them on board, be the change, be the person who's going to work with them, as well as working with your city. There shouldn't be a stigma. Again, I've seen rats in yards that are immaculate. I've seen them in yards that are horrendous, and everything in between. They're animals just like any other animal, and they're going to find a place where they can eke out a living. I like to promote an integrated pest management plan, and what that means is we always start with preventing them. So we do those good things that we talked about, like eliminating food and habitat. But then we also sanitize, so eliminating the scent trail, eliminating waste. Then we physically remove them. We can step into biological methods to control them, and then we get into chemicals, and that would be things like rat poison. So I am a huge fan of burrow destruction. If you can find the burrows, you can eliminate all the rats, and you can do it all at once, and it is dead simple. So we have two options that we use with Ferndale Rat Patrol. Number one is a burrow smoke bomb. The burrow smoke bomb is very straightforward. It looks like a cartoon stick of dynamite. It's pretty spooky. It's a lot of fun. And it's one way that you can get rid of them very quickly and effectively. The second way is the far better option, and that is dry ice. Dry ice is something that, again, you can use just like the burrow smoke bomb by finding the burrow and filling the holes. So this is an example of the dry ice treatment. This was outside in our downtown area, and that's me with my fancy shoes on, doing the dry ice method on a very large burrow system. So with dry ice, you're always going to do it in the morning. Dry ice is solid CO2. It sublimates into gaseous CO2. It sinks into the burrow system. When are rats out and about? At night. We do this during the day because they're sleeping. They've come home. So while they're sleeping, we're going to put 2 pounds of dry ice per hole. We can scale that up depending on the size of the hole. So sometimes 5 pounds, sometimes 10 pounds. We use a stick to push the dry ice in as much as possible. Then we cover all those iced holes with dirt, tamp it down, and that's the end of it. All the rats are sleeping. That CO2 sublimates into gaseous CO2. They become anesthetized, and then they asphyxiate, and they're done. There's no smell, there's no cleanup. It is easy. The burrow smoke bombs, like I mentioned, they look very scary. You cannot use them near anything that's flammable, so don't use it near the base of a tree or a shed or anything that's wooden. You can do it any time during the day. 1 bomb per 3 holes. You cover 2 of the 3 holes. You insert the bomb wick first, and when you do that, you're going to allow that wick to burn and create smoke, and then you throw dirt on top of it, tamp it down, and you're set. The reason that I don't like this option, besides the possible flammable nature of it, is because what does smoke do? It rises. Where's the burrow? Down below. So when we use something like this, the only time that I recommend it is, again, when there's nothing flammable around, but also after heavy rain over an extended period of time, because that's going to seal in all of that smoke. Otherwise, it's just not effective, especially when you have sandy soil. I love snap traps. I have snap traps. I will give you some snap traps. It is one of the most efficient methods next to burrow destruction. Traps should only be set at dusk and picked up before sunup. Because why? Rats are nocturnal. So we don't want to catch our squirrels. We don't want to catch our chipmunks. Chipmunks are diurnal. Squirrels are diurnal. They're going to be out during the daytime. So we're doing this at night, and traps should always be under milk crates or inside some sort of protective box so that we don't get our raccoons and our bunny rabbits and our skunks and things like that. Nobody wants to tangle with an angry skunk with his paw stuck in a rat trap. Snap trap placement is an art and a science. So again, if we have animals that are positively thigmotactic and they're going to be walking along the wall, where are we going to place our traps? Along the wall. Very straightforward. If I'm a rat and I'm walking along here, my head is going to be positioned right near my bait plate, and my kill bar is out here. So when I take my bait, I end up getting a snap right on the back of the neck, and that ensures that you have a very swift, very humane kill for that rat. No fuss, no muss, no catching a paw. One of the things that I love about that setup that I just pointed out, that's called a double stack trap. If you miss it with the first one, you're gonna get it with the second one. Very, very smart method. We also like using boxes, sometimes with holes, again, just to protect that trap and make sure that we don't catch anything that's a non-target species. Let's see if I can do this. I'm just gonna go right up to the laptop.
What do the red X's mean?
The red X's mean don't do that setup. Let's see if I can get that off there. So in these cases, if my rat walks along the wall, I don't want my trap far away from the wall. If my rat's walking along the wall, I don't want my kill bar out here and my bait in here. And if my rat's walking along the wall, I don't want my kill bar back here and my bait down there. So again, very, very relatively straightforward as long as we just keep that rat behavior in mind. We always want the bait up near the wall where the rat's head's going to be. We're a big fan of the Roger box. The Roger box was created by a Ferdale Rat Patrol member. All it is a box, and in this case, I believe it's an old plastic ammo box where we carve a hole in one end, and then we take a trap and put a little metal piece on it so that we can lower it down into the fitted box. That ensures that, again, we don't have other non-target species getting into that box, and it's so easy to pick it up basically at sunrise and bring it back into the house. So it's very straightforward. We have directions for that on Ferdale Rat Patrol. More safe trapping ideas. This is an example of an electronic trap, which I have an example of up here, and they're a little bit spendy. You can't use them outside because if you use them in an area where there's any sort of moisture, it can just cause it to short out. And now you've got a $70 piece of junk. But all you do is hit a switch, and now this is a live trap. And any animal that goes in there is going to get electrocuted. So I'm going to turn that back off so I don't hurt myself when I take it home tonight.
Battery, rechargeable battery? Or?
Not a rechargeable. That's just a big, I want to say that's a D cell in there. So more safe trapping ideas. Some people, when they find a burrow hole like that one in the picture, they want to put a trap right outside of it. That doesn't work. Why? Rats are neophobic. Things that are new, they don't trust them. So what we do is we always recommend, if you're going to trap near a burrow hole or near something that we know that rats are potentially coming out of, put the trap about an arm's length away. Just keep it at a safe distance. That'll make the rat less inclined to think of it as a threat. Again, I love the double stack, always underneath a milk crate, and that is outdoors. So you can see the bait is up along the fence line, and everything is positioned underneath this milk crate with the kilo bars out. Live trapping is something that a lot of people like to do. I'm not a big fan of it. You still have to eliminate the rats at the end. The typical method to do that, this comes with a bucket that you place all of the live trapped rats into. That's unpleasant for most people. It is effective, and it does allow you to make sure that you have caught a significant amount, because once you catch one, you're going to catch others. They hear each other, they smell each other, and they will gravitate towards each other. But the squeamish factor is very difficult to deal with. So best practices for bait. Highly scented items. In fact, we've got some good granola bars back there, and if you're not interested in eating them yourself, by all means, take them home. Chocolate is very fragrant, vanilla is very fragrant, and again, think about things that these rats might be interested in, given the proximity of businesses or trash or things in your neighborhood. Placing traps unset for a few days with bait is a really nice approach. So if you have rats that may have seen a trap go off and not gotten caught, they become trap shy. So what we do is we put those traps out with the bait, we get them used to it, we position them exactly where we're going to position them when we set them, and then on night number 3 or night number 5, we set all the traps and we have a nice harvest in the morning of a bunch of rats. So very straightforward sort of situations that you can put together. You can orchestrate that, and that makes it easier for you to deal with the rat situation. So just as an example, this was our very first Traptoberfest, where we tracked how many rats we could kill in a short period of time. So this was 2 weeks. We mapped them all out to see if we had certain areas where there was more rat activity. And what you can't see very easily at the very end is we had, at the end of 2 weeks of very concentrated rat trapping, 159 dead rats. And that was just a handful of us doing it throughout the city. So when we all participate, we can do this in a very effective manner. We want to take advantage of our animal allies. So owls are the raptor that can help the most because they're out at night. Hawks, eagles, things like that, they're out during the day. They're not very effective at rat control. Cats and ratting dogs can be useful, but cats are indiscriminate killers. They will kill birds, anything else out there, and they don't like tangling with something that they could potentially lose a fight to. And a very large adult rat is something that they can lose a fight to. So again, just an example. I am a big fan of possums. Possums can be creepy in your yard, but they will gladly eat and kill a rat, which is what we have in a video up there. And terrier dogs are by far the most enthusiastic rat killers out there. So why not poison? Just to give you a little bit of examples here. It's too risky to non-target species. So if we're taking advantage of our animal allies, if we're using poison, it's counterproductive. That's part of why we're in such a situation now, because we've been relying on poison that bioaccumulates and moves up the food chain, and it kills the animal allies that we've been hoping would help us with the rat situation. So secondary poisoning is a very real risk. It kills predators through bioaccumulation. It takes too long. It can be up to 2 weeks for the animal to die, during which time, if they didn't eat enough poison, now you've just got a rat that has very thin blood for a short period of time, and it's right back to doing rat stuff. Rats can drop poison when they're startled. So think about if you've ever had a hamster and you've seen it fill its cheeks. Rats do the same thing. So they can go to a poison bait box, take the poison bait, try to run home, and if they get startled by a dog or a noise, that poison bait can be dropped in the middle of your yard, and we've seen it happen where dogs and even kids have had primary poisoning because they pick up something interesting in the yard and they eat it. So these are some of the reasons. I wanted to point out some rat poison environmental risk. The poisons that we tend to think of as the highest risk are the ones that bioaccumulate. So those are the anticoagulant-based poisons. There was a study out of California that showed that in mountain lions, 14 out of 14 tested had been exposed to rat poison. That's fascinating. That's interesting data, and that shows mountain lions they're not out there killing rats, but something else is, and then it's moving up the food chain. 49 out of 53 raptors had been poisoned. They had been exposed to that poison, and 35 out of 39 bobcats had been exposed. Now, these anticoagulants persist in liver tissue, in some cases up to 248 days, which is 8 months. So imagine if your dog gets exposed to that kind of rat poison and it's living in their body for 8 months. That's why animals like coyotes or foxes that end up with mange in our cities oftentimes are suffering from secondary poisoning because it's taking a toll. It's not killing them right away, but it's taking a toll on their immune system, and they end up catching other diseases and just having a suppressed immune system. So poison kills non-target species. I'm not going to make you watch the horrible video here. These are just some examples from around town, as well as one of a barn owl that was succumbing to secondary rodenticide. And again, more and more examples. The one that I do want to point out is dogs. So dogs, again, they love sweet things, they love interesting things, they pick up things with their mouth. So if your dog gets exposed to an anticoagulant or rodenticide, the thing that you want to look for is strange pooling of blood, typically in the abdomen, any sort of bruising that may indicate that they've been exposed to an anticoagulant. Look for those things. Look for very white gum lines that might indicate that they're bleeding internally. Now, is it ever okay to use poison? The controversial stance that I have is yes, but. And in this case, I would say neurotoxin is okay to use in approved formats, but approved formats limit where you can place it. You can't just throw it out into your backyard and expect it to take care of a problem. Instead, you can use it in very controlled areas, in your basement, things like that, where you know that it's not going to be, that something else won't get into it and carry it away or be exposed to it. There are safer options than the neurotoxin. Rat X is something that I have an example of up at the podium. Rat X is basically corn gluten meal and salt, so it causes dehydration and death. There are a lot of people that think that bloat balls and things like that are better options. I'm here to tell you that they don't work. They can be very counterproductive to your effort, but Rat X in enough quantity is something that can work to kill the rat population, so that is an option. Now, what's the best adjunct to elimination? Contrapest. We are piloting Contrapest within Ferndale at a couple different locations. It is the biologic form. So it is a birth control for rats. It runs about $80. It should be considered part of a rat program. It is not a full solution. What I love really pointing out on this slide is this section that shows the IPM protocol without fertility control and then with fertility control. So you can see our spikes in population in the dark green, but when you add in a birth control into that mix, it flatlines. And that's a beautiful thing. That means less effort having to be spent hunting down burrows, having to set out traps, just by having a liquid contraceptive out there in areas of rat activity. So when can you use poison? Again, going back to my original point, in crawl spaces, basements, in areas that are protected, you can have a poison bait box inside there or use Rat X. Is there a poison that only kills rats? No, period. And anybody that tells you otherwise is trying to sell you something. Is it possible to be rat-free? Yes. And I like to point out Alberta. Alberta is rat-free. They're only rat-free because they talk about it and are so vigilant and what an astonishing map. That's Alberta. There's rats all around them. But the reason that they don't have rats there is because they talk about it nonstop. They put out great graphic art just telling people, hey, look, if you see them, say something, and we will make sure that we come out and eliminate them. And they are absolutely vigilant in their elimination campaign. So congrats, as we say on Ferndale Rat Patrol. Thank you for making it through the presentation. What I do want to do is run through just a couple questions that come up very commonly from residents. So trash cans, which one should you buy? Metal is always a good choice. I know that our waste control workers like to spike them like a football and dent them all up, but they're cheap and they're very effective. Rats typically don't chew through those. If you have to go with plastic, always go with the really thick, heavy plastic. It's a little bit less prone to having rats chew through it. And can you eliminate rats without harming other animals? Absolutely. If you're going to try to eliminate them, do it at night. Make sure you remember all those good things that we talked about rat behavior. So only trap at night, only trap along walls, trap along trails, and bait with familiar scents. Can you tell the difference between holes in the yard? This is just a fun graphic. There's so many different holes that you can find in your yard. Some could be bumblebees, some could be the cicada killer wasps. You can have groundhogs, which have a huge hole in your yard. And I'm not tingling with a groundhog. But rats Rats, again, have those 3 holes. In this picture, they've got a little cluster of 4. So you're just looking for something that fits the bill of what we've discussed here. And this was something very Ferndale specific. Your city is fantastic because you do have a rat control program, so you have a pest control group on hand. And then I wanted to get to a pop quiz real quick. Where would you put rat traps in this picture, which is underneath a sink? Anybody want to venture a guess?
Against the wall.
Yep, up against here, maybe against there. Where would you put rat traps here?
You can see the trail, right?
Yep.
They're all along the trail.
So we've got maybe a spot here, maybe a spot there. Where would you put rat traps here? This is a more common situation.
Those holes in the ground?
Those are. I would definitely do dry ice. I'd be so thrilled to do dry ice. And last but not least, we've got another shed there. And I'm going to show you where I would put traps. So I would put a trap right there and right there. So again, rat can walk in, his head hits the bait area, kill bar comes over, same thing there. We're not putting it right near there, which is more than likely where they're coming up from because that's a pipe. So just a little ways away. Same thing here. We know the rats are coming in here. We're not going to put the trap right in front of that spot. We're going to have it a little ways away, about arm's length away. In this case, if I'm using traps and I can't get them with the dry ice method, I'm going to put a trap against this wall and this wall. I like this spot because the rats are more than likely coming here and they have to go around this little bump out. So trap right there because I know that their body is going to curve around there. And last but not least, this one, it's a shed. There's an opening right here. And any little bump out like that, if I can get a trap near it where I know that they're coming along and there's a scent trail right there, I do a nice double stack. So
What about those big black clamp traps?
those work. Yeah, they work well. We have an unofficial term for them. They're called a snout snapper, only because a lot of people will use them in an inappropriate spot. And so they'll catch them on the nose, and then you have to use a shovel or something to eliminate the rat after the fact. I'm not a huge fan of them, but in the past I have given them to people who have arthritis in their hands because it's very easy to just squeeze it together and open the trap up. The most effective rat trap that we have are our standard issue Victor traps, and I like the ones that have the copper color on them because I'm fancy. I also really like the professional model that has the expanded bait plate because, again, if I can get more peanut butter on there. So in Ferndale, in my section of Ferndale, we have very basic rats. They love peanut butter. It seems to work every time. In Pleasant Ridge, very bougie rats. They love sweets. They love pepperoni from pizza. So very fancy sorts of bait work up there. But in both cases, having a bigger bait plate means I have more of an opportunity for that rat to step on it and trigger it, and it makes it very easy for me to catch them.
What is the bait of choice in Huntington Woods?
You know, fruit, weirdly, that's why I kept mentioning the mulberry bush. So mulberry trees, mulberry bushes, you don't have a lot of them in this area. Maybe you just have healthier rats, more health conscious rats. They're watching their cholesterol. They wanna make sure they have a nice healthy treat. Yeah.
So you're handling these traps with surgical gloves?
I
Mask at all? Or
I have definitely used surgical gloves. In fact, I travel with my little case here. So I have garden gloves that I use, as well as just some standard plastic gloves. I've also just handled them barehanded. Typically, the nice clean ones barehanded. I don't want to touch them after they've sat out there and had rats run on top of them for a while. So, yes?
I have a vegetable garden and a compost pile. Is that a problem?
It could be, yeah. So if we think back to those slides with the garden and the garden covers, where you use a metal mesh over top of any tender plants. That's a nice method to keep them from getting onto your plants and chewing tomatoes or things like that, any sort of fruit you might be growing. Compost piles are notorious for attracting rats because it's food. It's food, it's a potential thing that they can burrow into if it's compost on the ground. The best advice that I can give you is be vigilant. So I don't like changing my behavior. That's not to say that other people don't. So other people will change their behavior, eliminate their compost pile, they won't garden. I want to do all those things. I'm going to continue doing those things, but if I see any indication that there's a rat there, it's immediate rat death because I have 500 traps sitting around. Any other questions? I'm full of rat information. Yes?
So you said that to put a crate over the top of the traps. Will they actually go up into the crate?
Yep. Yeah, so let me go back to that slide real quick. Do you remember how small of a hole rats can go through?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, think about that crate that we have in here. Those holes are substantially bigger than the size of a quarter. Rats are moving along this fence. There's a hole right in there, and there's typically what? There's a handle right down there, and that's a much bigger hole. So if we have a much bigger rat that might not want to squeeze through a hole, they're going to go through the handle, come back in here, and go straight across those traps.
And then raccoons and
Yeah, that's why in this case we keep those traps as close to the middle as possible. Another thing that you can't see in this picture is we like to have something heavy on top because raccoons in particular will just knock the milk crate right off. So something heavy on top of that milk crate prevents them from knocking the milk crate off of the trap and getting their paws stuck in a trap.
How do you know you've gotten rid of them in your area?
It's a great question. When you no longer catch rats. Now, here's the other thing that I like to say, and this is not foolproof. If I have 3 holes, I estimate 7 rats. So if I can see 3 holes, I estimate that there's about 7 rats. If I see 1 rat in my yard, step 1 is I look for the holes to see if I can find a burrow because I want to do the dry ice method first and foremost. If I can't find that burrow, I'm going to assume that I've got between 5 and 7 rats somewhere. And that might be high or it might be low. What I like to do again is that trapping method that we talked about where you put out the traps with bait, but you don't set the trap. What a great way to figure out how many rats you have. So you put it out there, and if those traps all come off clean the next day, let's say you use peanut butter, and every single bait plate is clear the next day, that means you probably have a large volume of rats out there. So you set your traps, you kill your rats, put them back out there with some bait, see if you end up with those bait plates cleared again, and if you do, start setting them again. Yep. I also have a camera that I use in my backyard because that's who I am now. I just have a bunch of different tools at my disposal. I use a trail cam. I've also used Wise cameras, Nest cameras, you name it. I get a camera and I stick it somewhere and I look for rats and I do a head count. And those Wise cameras are dirt cheap now. They're about $25 to $40. So you can plug one in, stick it out there, see what kind of critters you have in your backyard. You might be shocked. Yep.
So the dry ice method.
Yeah.
You're putting dry ice down all 3.
Correct. Yeah, so the dry ice method, you have to have dry ice in every single hole that you find. I will also tell you, if you're getting dry ice, go to Bumblebee Gas and Extraction. It is in Hazel Park. Mention you are with Ferndale Rat Patrol. We have a special discount. We send everybody there. It's $1 a pound. So imagine, again, if you had 3 holes, and we know that you need at least 2 pounds per hole. That's a really cost-effective solution in that case. Now, it scales, obviously. There was a rat burrow in Madison Heights that we had to deal with that was about, I want to say 50 holes It was enough that it had actually caused the roots of a tree, a pine tree, to become dislodged and the tree collapsed. So in that case, we needed a very large volume of dry ice. So that was a much more expensive burrow bust. But one of the benefits of using bumblebee gas and extraction is the dry ice comes in a riced format. So it's very easy to just pour it in and then take a stick and stuff all that in, or the end of a shovel handle. You can use all of that to just pack it in there as much as humanly possible so that it's very effective.
You don't have to cover it with anything.
We throw dirt on top of that at the very end. So once we've packed all those holes with dry ice, you throw some dirt on top and just tamp it down with your foot. One of the reasons I like doing that is because at the end, if I see those holes open back up, I know at least one rat survived. And I just come back and I repeat the process until the holes don't open up again. Yes?
I missed it. No, but I heard you a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember that there are holes along fences and the house and garage and stuff, but are the holes in the middle of the yard also?
No. Does anybody remember what those holes are? Chipmunks. Yeah, if they're in the middle of your grass, we've got chipmunks, and I'll show you a picture of that. Yeah, chipmunks they're pretty innocuous. Did you guys know that you're going to get a pop quiz during all this? Yeah. Let's see if I can get those chipmunk holes. Yep, so 2 examples. So chipmunk burrow hole, typically it's somewhere in your grass like that, and you're looking for a hole. Can you see it up here? You're looking for a hole that's about the size of a quarter, and if you put a stick in that hole and it goes straight down, that's a chipmunk. If you put a stick in it and it goes kind of at an angle like this, that's a rat. Chances are it's not going to be a rat if it's right in the middle of your yard. You're looking for, you know, the depth can be pretty variable. This is why I have a million slides in this presentation. But about 7 inches straight down is a typical chipmunk plunge hole, and the opening is about 2 inches wide. So you can see that in these 2 pictures right here. So I just use a tape measure. And about 2 inches wide, that's a typical chipmunk hole. You don't see a big pile of dirt on the outside of it. It's just kind of invisible in the grass. And then when I inserted the tape measure, it's about 7 inches straight down.
With or without the chipmunk in it?
Yeah, he didn't come popping out of there, so.
When you're tamping that dry ice
Yeah.
in the hole, they don't escape out their other hole?
It has happened. So if you do have a burrow system, your best bet is to throw dry ice down all at the same time before you tap it in with a stick. And if you have a very large burrow system, get a couple friends. It's like a barn raising. You just call up people, everybody comes out, everybody gets a scoop of dry ice. The little gardening trowels are really handy for that. You can just scoop some up, throw it in the hole all at once, and through team effort, you usually end up with none of them escaping. Now, I will say if you have to do it by yourself, because I've had to do that myself, I take a rake and I put it over top of those holes. So any hole that I can't get to right away, I put something over top of it. I use a rake so that I can see if one has come up, and that way I can kind of scare it back into the burrow and drop ice right on top of that rake and have it go right through. Correct. Yep. Yeah, I don't recommend piling it on like mulch, but it's not going to kill the flowers off. It's all going down into a burrow system. Any other questions?
What in your childhood caused you to take this direction?
Yeah, I feel like I'm that kind of weird busybody that, especially after the owls died off in my neighborhood, seeing that it was such a weird trauma because I was so excited. It was like this Harry Potter moment where there were 2 adult owls and like 3 or 4 little babies. And I was so excited, and then I found one dead baby. And I was like, oh no, this is terrible. But I thought it was a fluke, and then I found another, and then another, and then eventually the parents ended up dead as well. And it took a little bit of time for it to really sink in that something had happened that was associated with the rats that I had noticed months earlier, but then it clicked. And I remembered that there was a business just a little ways down the road that was putting out a ton of rat poison. And there was an owl's nest right up in the tree. They're cavity nesters, and it was a dead tree that had a nice cavity up there. So all of that is just a way to say, sometimes there's a catalyst in your life that really makes you take a step back and reassess the way that you've always done things. And that's where I ended up. And now this is what I do in my spare time. The day before Mother's Day, I talk about killing rats.
Nobody to hire to help do this method, though.
No, unfortunately, so with the dry ice method in particular, our pest control folks can't use that method. There is only one product that they can use. That is called rat ice. Rat ice is dry ice with a label. That's it. But they are limited in what they can use because they have to use an EPA-approved product. Whereas I, as somebody who is not a licensed pest control person, I can just go buy some dry ice. But I can't charge you for it, and nobody can make money off of it because we're not pest control people. Now, the pipeline for rat ice has not been established in Michigan. I've been working with Bell Labs trying to get it established for a while, but unless a large city like Detroit signed up to have dry ice on hand, and you have to remember dry ice sublimates very quickly, so the pipeline to get it here, even though it's the same dry ice that we have in Michigan at a variety of places like Airgas and all these other companies, we have to have it specifically from Bell Labs with the label on it from an area that they've operated out of, which means they have to ship it here. So the cost goes up, there's storage issues, there's logistics issues. Thus far, we have not been able to make it work.
What about mice? I mean, I have a place up north and we've had mice, mostly a lot in the fall, say sometimes they're in the house and I put out poison for them and check them and kill the owls
Yeah.
in the area.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately. So don't use poison. It's pretty straightforward. You can use things like, I mentioned Radix. There's a mouse equivalent that just has smaller pellets. So Radix looks like, if you ever had rabbits or anything, it looks like rabbit food. It's just a pelletized form of corn gluten and salt that when they eat it, they basically dehydrate and die, which has the added benefit that when they die from this, there's less stink involved because they're very desiccated. Their body desiccates very quickly versus a more juicy rat leaving an odor behind. What was that?
You catch them in traps in the house.
Yeah, you can absolutely catch them in traps. Yeah. I recommend the snap traps and use the same method that we discussed during this presentation. If you are trapping for mice, they have the same basic behavior that rats have. And so when you place your traps, you're going to place them in areas that make sense for a mouse to be in. So you're going to place them along walls, just like we see here. So when you place a trap, you want your bait near the wall and your kill bar out because your mouse is going to walk in that same sort of path where they're up near a wall, they're scurrying. So just do it like that. Have your bait near the wall, kill bar out, your mouse walks across, eats a little bit of bait, and the kill bar comes down right on the back of their neck or in the middle of their back. So it's very quick, it's very effective. Oh, that's fun. That's fun. They have to come out and they have to eat something. Figure out what they're eating. You can either eliminate, you can either eliminate what they're eating so that they slowly starve or leave, or if you find what they're eating, put traps around it. Use it as bait. Yeah. Yep, it's a difficult problem. Yeah. Any other rat questions? Rats, groundhogs, skunks, possums, raccoons. I can talk about any sort of critter that is potentially in your backyard. I don't want to kill the other critters, just the rats.
How do we increase possum population?
Oh, increase. You become friends with one of the wildlife rehabbers who specializes in possums, and you make sure that your yard is very nice and safe for them. So no dogs that just get let out into the backyard, cats let out into the backyard, although most cats don't want to tangle with a possum. Yeah, so, but we have a wonderful wildlife rehabber, Motor City Possums in Ferndale. She is amazing, like just the nicest person, so. They do, yeah, they sure do. Possums, again, are very opportunistic. If they see the opportunity and they're hungry enough, they'll do it. And they've got that mouth that's very similar to a cat. They've got like kitty cat teeth, but a much bigger mouth, so they'll snap up a rat very quickly. Yeah. Yeah, she's a nice lady.
Did you approach that business that was poisoning rats, causing the?
I did.
And they were pretty cooperative, or?
No, unfortunately. Yeah. In fact, we ended up with 2 more dead owls in that neighborhood probably about 5 years later, within a week of each other. There was just 2 dead screech owls, one of which was in my actual backyard, and I wish I had the picture here because you can see my political candidate sign right behind me as I'm holding this poor little dead owl. And that's why I ended up being elected to city council in Ferndale, because I was crawling under people's homes trying to help them with a problem, and I'm a passionate advocate for the environment. And nobody wants dead owls. It's just the worst possible thing. Yeah. Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.